Hello, and welcome to the fifth episode of Dojo Talk. This is the BA Martial Artist coming to you. If you've been following my blog this year, you are aware I'm focusing on levels of perspectives to understand your organization. And I've been focusing on six specific perspectives: the organization, the customer, the process, business rules, systems, and data. All of these areas help in understanding different aspects of the organization. You may find you need to focus on some of them more than others, but all are important and tell a story. We kicked off January with Perspective 1, the organization, where we learned techniques around the business model canvas, functional decomposition diagramming, and value stream mapping. In March, we moved over to Perspective 2, the customer. We discussed why a focus on the customer is important, and we learned about customer journey mapping. In May, we started the conversation on business process, where we talked about what is a process, the components of a process, and how to create a process map. In July, we kicked off Perspective 4 on business rules, and we even had a special video cast around process mining and process automation in September. This month, we are going to continue our focus on the system and how understanding system architecture can bring deeper insight. And today, I am joined with my dear friend and colleague, Nader Nasseh. A little bit about Nader. Nader was born in Iran. Before his 16th birthday, Nader and his family moved to Nashville, Tennessee, due to his mom's full scholarship for pursuing her PhD in early child education from Vanderbilt University. Nader holds 2 degrees, one in mechanical engineering from Tennessee Tech University, and the other in computer science from Tennessee State University. Nader also made the National Dean's List at Tennessee State University and graduated with a 4.0 GPA. He's an All-American soccer player, an avid tennis and beach volleyball player. Nader is currently a senior vice president at Wells Fargo Home Lending Technology and has over 35 years of experience in global IT and business transformation, specializing in financial, supply chain, and business rule systems. In his current role, he's responsible for all data-related activities within home lending technology. Nader has been co-founder of 2 companies, one back in 1985 and the other in 2000, which is now part of Progress Software Corporation. He was also the Y2K manager for Ernst & Young LLP and Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher LLP, the oldest law firm in Los Angeles. Prior to those positions, Nader worked at Dollar General Corporation as a chief system architect, automating their warehouse distribution and store ordering systems. He's currently the president of the board of directors for Cornerstone of Hope Orphanage, which is a nonprofit organization for an orphanage located in Nigeria. He's been an active mentor with the Greater Des Moines Leadership Institute's Community Connect, and he is also an executive sponsor for the Wells Fargo Central Iowa Diversity and Inclusion Council Passport Series and Middle East Team Member Network Iowa Chapter. Nader and his wife live in West Des Moines, Iowa, with their twin boys and his wife's mom. So sit back, relax, and get ready for episode 5 of Dojo Talk. Welcome everyone to the 5th episode of Dojo Talk. I am here with a dear friend, and I know I always say that, but everybody I interview this year has been a dear friend. But I'm here with a dear friend and colleague, Nader. And you heard a little bit about who Nader is in the introduction. So we're going to jump right in and talk about systems, which is what we've been talking about for Perspective 5 of Dojo Talk. And so Nader, before we jump in though, I just want to welcome you and say thank you for being here today, knowing that you've had a pretty eventful night talking about systems, right?
Yeah.
System things you had to fix. So thank you for taking time out and being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So Nader, just to get you caught up a little bit,
Sure.
some of the things that I've been talking about with my followers, viewers, subscribers, is we've been talking about the different levels of perspective that you can look at to understand an organization. So we've talked about the organization as a whole, just understanding how the organization is set up. We've talked about the customer experience that the organization wishes to have as they deliver products and services. We've talked about the processes and how understanding the processes and how they fit together and work together is a great way to understand the complexity that could be occurring in your organization. We also talked about business rules and how business rules are very powerful to understand what are some of the services, the needs, the infrastructures that need to be in place in
Right.
order for the business to run effectively to deliver those services. And
Sure.
now we're moving into the system. And so I started talking a little bit about um, system infrastructure, how to understand them, what a system is, because a system can be defined in many different ways. For the topic of this is really technology, which is
Right.
what you are senior vice president over for many years is technology. So you are
Yes.
just the perfect person to have this conversation. But we're talking about how understanding systems can open up a lot of knowledge and help us understand also how our processes work together, what systems are needed for those processes, even when we get into perspective 6 when we talk about data. So I wanted to first ask you, we hear the term system architecture quite a bit.
Mhm.
And so, first of all, can you tell us a little bit of what is your definition of system architecture? And why do you think it's important for individuals that are working on projects, initiatives, innovation, doing creative initiatives, transformational initiatives, why it's
Right.
important for them to at least have a understanding of what system architecture is and what it can bring to the table?
Right. Excellent question, and it is a very complex question in a lot of ways, but I try to do it justice. So, system architect is truly that person that is in charge of the design, and I mean design, not just technology side of things, right? That person needs to understand what are the business needs. So you're the business person coming to us and said, Nader, I want to build the origination system for mortgage. Okay. So I need to understand all the different aspects of that. Who does what the roles are, what system they need to have access to, is it in the sales, fulfillment, post-closing, so forth. And using that as an example is you look at it and say, not only do I need to understand my business, I need to understand what technology is available, right? It isn't what's the industry available, what do I have at work that I can leverage for this purpose. And then on top of that, you got to keep in mind what the customer experience is going to be. So you really put in a lot of emphasis in that system architect to know all of those things. So, there are people that have been doing it most of their lives, or they came from the technology development or business who were technically savvy, and they kind of got educated, got their degree, and started working on the design part. And it's one of those things that really, it requires a kind of creative mind. You hear the term thinking outside the box, and
Right.
that just means just because it works today doesn't mean tomorrow it's going to be that way. And the way I try to explain to everybody is kind of like when you were single, you had different way of life. When you got married, you had different way of life because now you think of two, you and your spouse, right? Your soulmate. And then when you have children, that's another, it's just completely different. So you really can't have one formula that fits all of that, right? But that's the beauty of that is that evolution of it, right? So it's really important to kind of, you know, understand the need, understand the expectation, understand the growth. So as an architect, you have to build that foundation that is flexible enough that you could kind of, you heard the term plug and play. That means that I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time I want to do it. So I use a lot of analogies. So think of it that you build in a house, right? You asked me to build a 3-story house and I built you one. Then you want to add 7 more stores on top of it. And I go like, well, you didn't tell me that. Now I have to tear the foundation, put a new one that could do that. Versus if the first day you come to me and say, Nada, I want to build a Sears building, but right now I only want the first 10 floors. If I know it's going to be 100 floors, I will put the foundation to support it, but I will build the first 10, then the next 20, next 30, and we evolve that way. So from that perspective, there's, that communication is going to be important. When I was a chief architect, I used to have a little um, uh, photo on my computer to remind myself to be humble about it. which was there was a buyer and a builder looking at the flat land. And the buyer says, I want to build a house. And the builder is looking at a log cabin house. And, the little cloud that comes like you're thinking. And then the buyer was thinking Taj Mahal. It is so important to make sure that you understand what that is. So being an architect, truly architect, is really knowing your audience and also talking to all of them. In other words, the architect has to talk to a business person to say, what are you trying to do? And challenge the business person, what is the customer experience so I can build that accordingly. Then talk to the development and said, if I built the design, do you understand what you need to code to make that happen? Then work with QA. I said, do you understand how to test it from a functionality testing to make sure the coding, the expected and actual match. And along the way, through all of those, you're going to find gotchas, right? You're going to find something you didn't think about, like, oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about this, and be able to incorporate that in a proactive way to make the end product, when he's ready for prime time, to be the best that it can be.
So you took a totally different direction here that I like, though, because you started from the system architect and what the system architect is responsible for, which is the design. And that system architect is working with the developer and is working with QA and is working with the business, which is very interesting because sometimes that system architect is also part of like technology as a whole. So that could be the developer and whatnot. So for someone who may not be working on a project, let's say, who is new to the organization and they just want to understand how the systems work and how they support the different processes within the organization, how could somebody go about finding that out? Or what advice or guidance would you give somebody if they just want to get an understanding of, here are the systems we do have access to? Because like you said, you have to understand what technology is available, right? Because you may not have industry standard, that just may not be where you're at. How can people go about doing that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because truly the way to do it is kind of create what I call a conceptual design, right? The conceptual design, it kind of tells you, think of it as almost like a white paper. If I wanted to build a house, I cannot build the second floor. I have to build the foundation, then the first floor, then the second floor, right? So there are things that have to happen in sequence. But then when I built the first floor and the floor is done, the foundation is done, I can have somebody working in the kitchen at the same time I'm working in the den, at the same time I'm working in the office on that same floor. So there are certain things that you can divide and conquer at the same time. So it's important from a sizing perspective to know, do I have a choice of kind of concurrently take those things on, or do I need to do it in sequence because of the nature of what it is? The same is true with any app. So if I'm putting a new app, right, you really need to understand what's the purpose of it. And when I say what problem are you trying to solve? So I can look at my tools to see what I have to provide you that. And let's say I have something that's a proven pattern. We used it for, say, card services and community banking, and now I want to apply it for mortgage. Well, you tell me, oh, Nader, that takes 6 months. I don't have 6 months. I have 2 months. So I might have to take outside the box, as they call it, and come up with a new tool that does most of that work for you, right? So we can do it faster. And sometimes, it's easy to say that, but then when you try to do it, they say, well, I don't have the infrastructure, as you mentioned, right? Now I have to go to the data center and tell them to purchase the servers. Well, that's going to take 3 months to buy it, configure it, incorporate it, make it ready for production. So that's 3 months that even if my code was ready, right, I was ready to deploy it, I don't have the environment to do it. So it's so important to kind of know, what are the contingency, what are the planning, and how do you kind of, because you're always as good as your weakest link, how do you make sure you don't have any vulnerabilities? And sometimes, no matter what you do, it's kind of like a lot of people say, like, let's learn how the tsunami happens so we can stop it. Well, that's not going to happen, right? So if you can't control that, best you can do is control how do you recover from it, right? How can I reduce my vulnerability when the tsunami comes? Yeah, it's damaged, but I can manage it and have minimum impact to the community and everything else. So from an infrastructure perspective, it is so crucial to kind of be evolving from that perspective. So the design, you get better, just like, anything in life. So the evolution is the more you do of that, um, the better you get at it because you will have experience, right? So this is a difference between, like, say, something that you say, I read about it, I heard about it, versus you did it. If you did something for 3 years, you're a subject matter expert, right? If nothing else, you know things that didn't work, which makes it that much closer for us next time not to spend time on that. So that proven pattern is that, like, I found a way how to make this work. And it is going to be so crucial to say, does what you're asking me to do now, does it apply to that assembly line? Or do I need to create a new one? Even exact same thing, but I'm going to be doing like 200 loans a month versus 2,000 a day. I might take the exact same code and do it twice to keep it separate so I don't break those things. It's kind of like having a box that has the DVD, VHS, and a cassette player. If one of those don't work, you have to throw that box away and get a new one. Versus if they were separate, I can take the cassette out and everything else is working just fine. So it's just understanding the needs, criticality, like certain things, say, you know what, I have 3 days to fix it. So if it doesn't work today, I can fix it tomorrow. The others is real time. If I don't have it, I can't do my business. You got to have contingency planning. Kind of like a space shuttle going out. There's 11 backup supercomputers waiting for the first one to fail for even 1 second. They switch to the second one. So because people's life is, is that, you know, uh, critical to their lives. So those are things you want to do to make sure you do your due diligence to, expect the unexpected from that perspective. So it's very critical on how you design things. Um, it constantly, and that's what I mean by evolution. Look at even any industry, even car. 50 years ago, we didn't wear a seatbelt. Nobody had anti-lock braking. You didn't have a computer to tell you oil change needs to be done, maintenance is done. Now the computer literally tells you where you are, where you need to go, and all the information that is important for you to be able to be more at ease and have it accessible to you. And that's a service that you want technology to do. Technology should be a component of business and be the service that they can allow them to say, hey, I just asked them to do this. Does that make sense or not? Mm-hmm. And did I get any return on that investment or not? Because technically you could do a lot, but what did you get out of it? If it's not, then you need to assess, was it what I asked, the requirement? Was it the design? Was it the coding? Was it the testing? And again, you get better at it, right? So, but the architect is really the foundation of all of that. This is the person that kind of, it's kind of like a parent, right? As your child were a baby, right? They had different needs that you had to take care of, and then they go to high school, then they go to college, and they get married and have their own life. Your role as a parent never changes. You still love them unconditionally, but their need for you and the things you can do to make their life better changes. And the architecture is the same exact thing. End to end, they have to be engaged.
So you said quite a bit there about evolution and the evolving, and as you are looking at your systems,
Right.
understanding the tools and understanding the systems that are used, the purpose, but
Right.
not only the purpose, but the problem that that piece of technology is solving for the
Sure.
business. And you
Yeah.
also talked about the conceptual design. So the conceptual design, some might be familiar with system context diagramming. It could be some sort of system, a diagram that shows the relations and the interactions between the systems.
Right.
But you talked about how you can go about identifying them. Let's
Yeah.
say you work for an organization that it's not heavy in documentation. So they don't
Yes.
have those conceptual designs. So
Everybody, yeah.
therefore, you're going to have to build relationships with
Correct.
your architects, your developers, your technology partners.
Yes.
How would you advise individuals, since you manage IT individuals and have for many decades, how would you recommend or what advice would you give to individuals on how they can build those relationships and maintain them with their IT partners?
Excellent question. As an individual, if I wanted to learn those things, and you know, if you look at it from a, you hear the terminology SDLCs, like you know, um, software development lifecycle. But that's really true any lifecycle, business lifecycle, data lifecycle. But you need to look at it from there is a need, right? There's a requirement. Based on that requirement, you're going to do a design that's going to give you a system or a functionality that you could apply to get the results you expect. So from that perspective, it's requirement, design, coding, testing, and then putting it into production. So what you don't want to do is kind of do it in vacuum, that like silos. So when you put it in, you break somebody else's by accident, right? So it is so important to say, hey, I'm doing this, and you guys need to be aware of it. So individual that comes in that don't know nothing, that was me 11 years ago. I had no idea what to have mortgage work. So I asked a lot of questions trying to figure out. And you also need to know your audience, right? So there's a big difference between somebody that's been here for 5 years, right? And then somebody who's been here for 20 years. Now, the 20-year veteran can tell me how Wells Fargo does it. But the 5-year person that's been here, right, could tell me how the industry best practices are. And I can take both of those and say, well, from a vulnerability perspective, do I have everything in place to do that? Or do I have vulnerabilities or gaps that I need to address? Asking question of all the different ones, right? Because they get different perspective of things, right? So like if they ask you about a specific, like how does, for example, mortgage works, they're going to get a different answer, same guiding principle, but they're going to get different answer that they get from me because we have different lenses. We do different things. We can surely talk about our portion, right? So they need to understand that there is a business group, right? So the business group that says, I am kind of like your functional business person. I understand the purpose of that, what I'm asking you to do, right? And then there's another person in the business that says, my job is to make sure it goes through the whole life cycle. From the time they come up with an idea, how do I get it into production so they can leverage it, right? So it's almost like a role of a project manager, but it's not. It's a business, we call it business consultant or business analyst. That business person needs to make sure they stick with that release all the way through to make sure everything they wanted is done. Like you said, the gap and everything else. So a new person that comes in just need to understand, like, in what's the industry best practices. Like if you went into the credit card that has three major components. There's authorization when you go into the store and you swap your credit card. Then that information goes to the Visa, MasterCard, those card services, and they approve you, authenticate you, and then they move the money to the merchant's account. So those are the three components. Never changes, right? So you have authorization, clearing, and settlement. That's it. So whether you do one transaction or million transaction, that's what it would take. Some industry, it depends on what type of service you provide. The mortgage is a great example that there's like 15 different ways to fund the loan or qualify someone. So you got to know each one of those things. It isn't that simple. So the person that new comes in, they need to understand what are the different components of whatever that business is, retail, you know, uh, you know, um, insurance, whatever the industry you're looking at, you need to understand their practices. But to your point, you brought up a good point, which is, if two different institutions doing the same business, like say insurance, they go about it differently. You kind of need to be aware of how they're different and how they're the same. So maybe the hybrid of those two is what should be the next generation of doing that work. And so it is going to be best way I know how to do it is to ask the right question. And you might not know that day one, but like you said, when you ask a question, and maybe another question pops up, and you ask that, and that's how you get to know, what's going on. And so I think asking questions, and I'm more of a visual guy, maybe because I was a designer, so I actually write everything down. So I have a point of reference. You're absolutely right. Almost everybody they're so busy building it that they forget to document it. which is great when you're doing it. But even I might not remember what I built last year, right? Why did I do it that way? Oh. So I documented and I actually put notes for myself so I know what I did, why I did it, or put notes in the comments in the design itself. So anybody reads it. So the conceptual design, and then after conceptual is what I call a logical design. So logical design, it's okay, you had the concept, right? That is what would be on white paper no matter who was doing it. The logical would say, this is what I have available to me. This is the things that I have right now that I can leverage to build that. For example, if you were living near the mountains, your material to build a house would be rocks. So chances are you're going to build rocks. You're not going to build a house made out of sand. But if you were in the beach, you might want to build it out of sand, or if you're in the middle of the desert. And so there's different things available to you, different things that you could do that you want to leverage to your advantage. So there's combination of that, and then there's always things that if I had that, I could do a better job, right? I could provide you a better quality. So that's a more of a corporate enterprise level. Hey, do you want to invest into that becoming an enterprise solution so everybody can use it, for example?
So I want to go a little bit deeper because
Sure.
when you first started with the building relationships, you had
Yeah.
started with, you have to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
You have to know your audience. You have to listen to other perspectives.
Right.
You're also bringing in what you already know to the table. So you're
Yes.
bringing in your industry knowledge, and there are different ways that you can communicate. But there is a little bit of a perspective because I used to be a developer as well.
Okay.
That's how I started my career
Yeah.
there, and I'm not sure if this is still as prevalent as it was when I had started my career, but there really wasn't a lot of conversation with IT professionals because you would hear they don't have personality
Right.
in their own silo, they're in their own world. All they want to do is code, all they want to do is develop. They really aren't personable, they don't want to really talk. Just
Yeah.
tell me what you want and let's go ahead and build it. But the technology side, especially now that we're going digital a lot in a lot of areas, and now with everything that's happened in 2020 with
Right.
this pandemic, is forced us to go into virtual and to
Yeah.
go into areas we probably wouldn't have been going into this soon.
Yeah.
How would you managing and developing technology individuals, technology team members,
Right.
how would you tell somebody who's not in technology? How
Yeah.
do you build a relationship with someone in technology or vice versa? Technology, my technology
Sure.
people, right? I need you to interact with the business because at the end of the day, we're building, just like you said, a
Right.
business need. So, how do you get rid of some of those myths and
Yeah.
stereotypes and biases and build those strong relationships that can help build these solutions?
Excellent, excellent point. So the secret sauce is, it's how you make your best friend. First day you met them, they were total strangers, just like 50 other people you met that day. But there was something about them that you kept on investing and building to get it to where now you take bullet for each other. Well, that doesn't happen overnight, and it's more of an earned, right? So the same is true with any relationship, including the technology business. What makes it even more challenging is almost like people from two different languages wanting to talk to each other. So if I was speaking Farsi and you were speaking English and we didn't understand each other's language, right? We have to settle with visual kind of point of contact. Either use our fingers to say like eat, right? Or sleep. You had to come at visual so we could communicate. But once I know some of the phrases and you know some of the phrases, we can actually talk. Next thing you know, we actually speak each other's language, and we might actually come up with a hybrid of kind of like a Persian English language. And so this is no different than that. You mentioned that technology people are very logical in nature because they're coding. Coding has to be black and white. Either do this or do that. There's no shits or gray. It's not like a human being that has emotion and emotion reacts differently to it, right? When I'm stressed, I might be getting hungry and I eat a lot of food. You, on the other hand, when you get stressed, you might not have appetite at all. So it's different. And a business, You need to understand, they say, I don't understand technology. Okay, you don't need to understand it, but you need to, realize that you need it to be able to do what you need to do. So need to make that work, right? You understand that, uh, you know, to the point of being smart enough about the technology so you could leverage it the way it is. Now, you know, 50 years ago when we were looking at a PC, first of all, it didn't exist. They took the whole floor of the building, right? The businesses would say, I don't know what you're talking about. Now, because they have an iPad, they got smartphone, they understand it. They might not know how it works, but they know that is needed to be able to have access to my information right away, right? And you said digital, that's where that is. The other thing digital brought in, and to me, it's like it's such a amazing thing to be part of it because of COVID-19 even surfaced faster, which is for the first time people realize, you know what, production or my environment doesn't have to be sacred, doesn't have to be perfect before I use it, right? I have no choice. I'm virtual. I have to go digital to be able to do my business. So all of a sudden, it became not that you blindly want to do it, but kind of be aware. But you making your environment to be your testing ground. Again, to your point, to be able to meet the demands going forward, the transformational, you hear the terminology, agile methodology and all that. It really means that there's no longer business telling what they want and they walk away and technology say, okay, I got it, I go build it for you. It's both of them sit down together and figure it out, right? They can evolve right there because then I don't have to wait for 2 weeks to get it requirement enhanced. It could be in the back of a napkin. You tell me, no, 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 this is what I meant, right? And part of it also is as we evolving, there are new functionality and features available where before it used to be one, now it's multiple. Which one are you talking about? I use an analogy a lot for Apple. 50 years ago, Apple was just fruit. Then it was Apple the computer. And I have to correct them now to say, no, it's the Beatles recording studio because it is so many different things that it can be. So you have to be precise. What are you trying to build, right? And so having the business and technology together, they might realize like, ooh, I didn't ask you the right thing, or I was vague, so you took it the wrong way. So that collaboration is going to be so much better because you nail it before it actually becomes requirement. So my design is better. And if I don't catch it in requirement, catch it in design is even better before the customer sees it, right? So anything you could do in advance, which is why it's so important of that collaboration. And so that partnership is more and more, business realizes that technology isn't I build it and they will come. It's more like I need them to build what I want. And you, to some degree, want the technology to protect you from going the wrong path, doing something that might look great on paper, but it doesn't add any value once you go in there. The other biggest challenge in technology is that you have greatest idea and I try to build it and it takes me 6 months and in 6 months is obsolete, right? So like communication is so key.
Well, you said something there that's always been a debate as well, especially in the business analysis industry. And I get this question all the time. I hear it all the time.
Right.
And you work with business analysts as well. So I know you're familiar with project teams and all of
Yes.
that. But there are now a lot of organizations that are requiring business analysts to know technology,
Yes.
to know how to write SQL queries, to
Yeah.
know how to do different sort of coding.
Right.
And so they might consider them a technical BA, or they
Right.
might not even consider them a BA because we have so many different names as business
Sure.
analysts.
No, absolutely.
Now, for myself, and I know there's many different thoughts here coming from a developer, and I'm
Right.
a business analyst,
Yeah.
and I did that for many, many decades. I do believe that having an idea of technology and how it conceptually works
Yes.
has helped me to ask some questions that others may not ask because they're just not aware.
Right.
But I also don't think it's a hindrance if you don't know technology to
No.
down to the language, because that's what your technology partner should be there
Oh,
for, to help
absolutely.
you,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
As you continue to do the work, you'll get more experience, you'll start to understand things more, and you'll start to ask certain questions. But I don't necessarily think if you tell a business analyst you need to know technology, number one, that's too broad in my
Yes,
mind. There's too much
absolutely.
technology out there. I don't know how you would learn it all, number
Right.
one. Right. And then
Yeah.
what is the purpose of the technology partners as you talk about, roles, and all of us play a different role. So what has been, do you agree with my thought? Let me just put it that way,
Yeah.
being in technology as long as you have. Do
Yeah.
you feel that business analysts should be out there trying to learn every aspect of technology down to coding in order
Yeah.
to be effective in their job?
No, I don't believe that's the efficient way of doing it because they become a very expensive developer from that perspective. Because so there is mm, imagine you're in a community, right? Because the corporation is a community, it's a family. So from a family perspective, if you and I wanted to build a community, we're going to need restaurants, we need schools. For restaurants, we need chefs, we need waiters and waitresses, and for school we need teachers, the principal, and all that. So can I do all of that? Probably. Would I be good at it? Probably not, but I sure would do my best to kind of keep it going until we can get there. So if, a lot of times, I've been a founder of two companies, and a lot of times when I talk about it, people go like, wow. And I go like, no, it wasn't easy when you try to build a company because you have nothing. I don't have investors, I don't have employees. So for me to recruit you as an employee, I have to paint a picture for you, not what it looks today, what it will be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, for you to have the ability to say, you know what, I want to join Nader on that journey, or this is not what my desires are, so I'm going to, you know, say thank you and pass up on it, right? And so it is important to know what that is. So to your point, I think they need to know, the business person need to be technically technology smart, but not necessarily know how to work. And I use the analogy of car, right? You don't need to know how the engine works to drive a car, but you do need to know there's an engine. And and I have people come to me and say, I can't find a gas tank. Well, that's because it's electrical, right? Yeah, and that's okay, right? And they realize it. I said, not that I know we have electrical car. I'm going to ask that. Oh, this one doesn't have a gas tank, so it must be electrical. Yes, it is. And so that kind of evolves from that perspective. So it is important to ask the right questions. But if you ask to, if you continue to ask questions, there's no such thing as a silly question. The
Mm-hmm.
confirmation, right? I asked you a question because, like, when I joined and I asked you a ton of questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you were educating me on the business so I could do my job better. So some of the question is I knew the answer, I just wanted confirmation. Am I making the right assumption? There's others that I had no idea, and you knew it, and I learned. So that collaboration happened. The same it is with technology. There are certain things that you need to know. I can give you a requirement in 2 sentences, and it's going to take you 6 months to build, and then another 9 months to test. Is it really or should I spend extra 2 days and give you something that you could code in 2 weeks and they can test it in 2 months?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it is important to have that kind of communication. And again, and that's why I use the analogy of best friend. It is evolving from that perspective. I am not the same person I was, you know, uh, 10 years ago because of everything that I learned, because of the people that I've been exposed to, because of, you know, uh, uh, friendship and partners like yourself. I am a better person that I was then. And I'm looking forward to even be better, grow from that perspective. And the conceptual design, it's, if you're not familiar with it, it's a brand new thing. Just like anything else you did in your life. First time you rode a bike, were you good at it? You're right. But now you do it, listen to music, chew gum, and ride bike without even thinking. So that's where you want to be from a relationship perspective because you know they have your back. And it's going to be so crucial to say, you know, paint a picture for your audience. Doesn't matter if it's technology, business, project management, operation, risk, audit. They all should be in that table. So as we build it, audit can say, you're going to get audited that. Make sure your data is encrypted. Okay, it's better to know now than wait until I'm in production for 6 years and somebody comes and challenges me on it and I have to go build that. So those things, you know, um, hopefully that resonate with people to understand. I don't need to know all of it, but I need to know that those are the components of it.
Right. And to your point, and I want to be very clear, I do know that in some countries and some industries, it is required for business analysts to have a certain level of technical
Right,
acumen.
right.
Hopefully, you know that before you go for the position so
Sure.
that you know what you're getting into. That
Correct.
is just what some of the industries and organizations are going toward.
Right.
But what I don't want people to feel is if you are a business analyst, that if you don't know technology
Right.
down to the nitty gritty, that you can't be effective because you
Yeah.
can 100%
Absolutely.
be
Absolutely.
effective by asking questions and uncovering and doing your due diligence on trying to really understand the business requirements and the business needs. So I 100% agree. And so, Nada, I just want to say thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing all of your knowledge with us around technology, system architecture, building relationships, all of that, different techniques like the conceptual design and the logical design. I
yeah.
greatly, greatly appreciate it. You gave us some great information. And for those who are watching and or listening, I hope you found that this episode was extremely informative like our past ones have been. And I do look forward to wrapping up this perspective. I'll be wrapping it at October, November timeframe, and we're moving into data next.
Mm,
So we have some a special guest coming in who's a data guru to talk
right.
about that. But data is what we're going to be talking about in November and December. And so until next time to everyone, again, thank you, Nada. But until next time, I hope everyone stays safe, stays healthy, remember to vote, and just be
Amen.
great from the BA martial artist to you. Until next time.